You're watching The Truth is Viral, the only news program on the internet trusted to deliver the truth since 2008. And now, here's your host, Mr. Bobby Powell.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bobby Powell, and we've got a small but determined crowd out here in Lansing, Michigan today, but we are streaming live right now on the Guerrilla Media Network, Liberty One TV, and my own network. We're reaching up to 20 million people. So we're going to get this going because our featured guest today, Patrick Colbeck, a candidate for governor in the state of Michigan, is going to speak, and he's got to get going because he's got another rally over in Grand Rapids to get to. Right now I'd like to introduce Mark Gurley. He's the vice chair of the Grassroots Michigan GOP, and he's going to lead our invocation. We're going to dedicate this rally to our Father in heaven. Mark.
Heavenly Father, we are thankful that you have stayed the rain as we get this event going. Father, we just come to you in Jesus' name to humble ourselves and to honor you. For we realize that our rights come from you. And we must honor you because of those rights. We are thankful that we get to live in the land of the free and the brave, that you move in our hearts to do what is right, that you've given us the freedom to do what is right. Not the freedom to do whatever we want or whatever we feel, but the freedom to do what is right. And we thank you for that freedom. Father, we ask your blessing today on this event and the other events that are taking place around Michigan that are looking to restore freedom and liberty and the right to private property. And we just thank you that we have been privileged to be born in a nation such as the United States of America, where we get to enjoy these inherent God-given rights. We just want to say thank you, and we want to honor you and praise your holy name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I'd like to just say a couple words about our rights before I introduce Senator Pat Colbeck, who's running for governor. When I think about our rights, if you watch any of the news media, commonly referred to as the fake news, they keep trying to tell us that your right is whatever it is you feel is owed to you or due you or whatever you want. And our founding fathers had amazing wisdom that something they wrote 240 years ago would still be relevant today. The Constitution of the United States does not give us our rights. It does not give us our Second Amendment rights. It does not even give us our First Amendment rights or the other 24 amendments. It's God that gives us those rights. And it was the Constitution and our founding fathers that knew the heart of man was inherently wicked, and it was designed to rein in that heart so that we would do the right thing and keep our rights that were God-given. I'm really excited to introduce to you Senator Pat Colbeck, who is one of the four Republican candidates for governor. I've known Patrick for a long time. In fact, I was the Michigan citizen that brought American laws to American courts to Representative Dave Adrian when he was a state rep, to try to protect our courts from outside laws, particularly Sharia. And we had retired General Jerry Boykin come to the Capitol here, along with Kamal Saleem, a former Muslim Brotherhood terrorist who came to Christ, and William Wagner, who's a professor emeritus here from Cooley and heads up Salt Lake Global. And we were looking to educate senators and reps on the dangers of Sharia. And I'm proud to say that 2 senators showed up, and Patrick Colbeck was one of them. And ever since then, he's become a good friend of mine. I also run a ministry called the Michigan Oak Initiative. It's part of a national organization called the Oak Initiative. And our focus is to bring a Judeo-Christian worldview back to culture. And one day while I was taking a shower, the Holy Spirit just kind of interrupted what I was doing and said, "You need to trademark Make Michigan Great Again." So we actually own Make Michigan Great Again trademark, and we stuck it in the ministry. It's a political and a religious and a merchandise trademark. And we did that so that the politicians who would want to ride on the Trump train and try to use that that terminology would be prohibited from printing that. And so I've had to call quite a few of them and say, hey, you can say it all you want, but you can't actually use it in your marketing. And we're reminding people, 2 Chronicles 7:14, that we have to repent for our wicked ways, if my people, and then we'll heal our land. And Patrick Colbeck understands that and understood that when we came out with that. And so our ministry came out with a slogan called Christians for Colbeck, because he was getting attacked by the Muslim Brotherhood and we wanted to stand with him. And we've got play cards available. I'll get some if you guys would like some. It says Christians for Colbeck on one side and Make Michigan Great Again on the other. But how do you choose a candidate for any position in government? Particularly if you have more than one candidate that is Christian or God-fearing. And Exodus 18:21 gives us that understanding. And I think our founding fathers understood that when they were looking at We the People. And it says, when you choose a leader from among the people, that's how we choose leaders, right? We the people. You must first look for a capable and able man. And Patrick Colbeck is extremely capable and able. He has done more in the Senate than anybody that's been in the Senate. He might allude to where he spoke this morning, but he was the first gubernatorial candidate to speak there in over 3 decades from the Republican Party. So he's fearless. That's the second thing. He fears God, and that's an important characteristic. Third, a lover of truth or trustworthy. He has stood the line for gun rights, opposing Common Core, for religious freedom, even if it meant that he would have his committee chairmanships pulled. He stood against the gas tax. He stood against Obamacare. He's been faithful, and so he loves truth. And the last point is not given to covetousness, which is a fancy way of saying not given to dishonest gain. And if you look at the votes of the 2 establishment candidates, they have over 90% of the time voted in special interest favor rather than in the common interest of all of us. In fact, Bill Shooter voted 100% in favor of capital cronyism type stuff. Callie, 92%. Senator Colbeck, 3.5%. So he is the only candidate in my lifetime in Michigan that stands up for the Constitution. He's a concealed carry holder. He's a constitutional carry proponent. He loves God. He loves our freedoms. He's the only candidate in my lifetime that meets those four criteria hands down. And so I'm encouraging you to vote for Senator Pat Colbeck for governor so that we maintain our rights, particularly our Second Amendment rights, which is what this march is about. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you my friend, Senator Patrick Colbeck.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, God, for getting rid of those raindrops for a little bit, too. That worked out perfect timing, didn't it? Well, thank you guys for coming out here. I often say to the students that come up to the Capitol or I go visit in the schools that if you do not exercise your rights, if you do not know what those rights are, you will lose them. And the fact that you guys are out here braving the showers to come out here and assert your First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, all the rights that we have in our Constitution, including all the ones that are undefined because they're covered by the 9th and 10th Amendments. Thank you guys for coming out here and asserting your rights. Matter of fact, right before coming over here, my friend Bob, who's Bob Cushman, who's filming right now, but he's been driving me all around the state as a volunteer for our campaign. We were out in Culver's Restaurant up on Lake Lansing Road, and we were talking to a young man about our First Amendment rights. And I said, can you name all 5 freedoms in the First Amendment? And to his credit, he got them all except for redress of grievances, which essentially is, I want to complain about your service, Mr. Colbeck. So I was okay with that one. But I said, this is really good. He actually knew all those rights. And I think we need to make sure that we inculcate that in our next generation and make sure that they understand it. And the fact that you guys are out here today talking about this, making sure that we're doing an open carry. I'm an advocate of constitutional carry, which means that we have the right to bear arms in self-defense. It's not a matter, we don't have a right to bear arms to go hunting. No, it's much more fundamental than that. And you can see why that is important. Michigan Article 1, Section 6 is very clear on the right to bear arms in self-defense. We've seen what the impact is when citizens are not allowed to go off and carry. You've seen it in parkland shootings out in their schools. When you have a school resource officer that uses himself, his body, as a human shield, that Coach Heiss, he died because he was not able to carry a gun in self-defense. Meanwhile, back in Maryland, what happened? We had a school resource officer that was carrying, and you don't hear too much about that because it's only the bad guy that got hurt on that. There's a difference. We have those rights embedded in our Constitution for a reason. They have the embedded wisdom of our founding fathers, so that we actually benefit from the fact that they actually studied these issues. They went into depth. They looked at history. They understood what worked, what didn't work. And then they put it into this Constitution so it's not going to be changed on a moment's notice. Now, I know there's some people that say we have a living Constitution. It's only living in context of this thing called Article 5, which tells us how to go off and change it. It's not living in context of the fact that they can just make it up to be whatever they want. This is not a document that's intended to have Harvard law professors go off and change it without a vote of the people. The vote of the people matters. And the fact that you guys are out here as we the people is something that testifies to the fact that this is where our power, this is where our rights get enforced. They come from God. That's what we believe. That's what is documented in our Declaration of Independence. Our rights are given to us by God. But you know what? They're exercised here on the earth, and the fact that you guys are out here testifying to that is phenomenal. And we finally have somebody in the executive office that's actually respecting that as well with President Trump. Isn't it refreshing to actually have somebody out there that understands all of our constitutional rights and is going off and defending them? That's what I'm going to go out right now to an event out in Grand Rapids. So apologies for having to skedaddle out there, but I want to make sure that the folks who are defending our rights are defended as well. And you know what happens whenever you go off and defend and assert your rights, right? You get attacked as well. And what we're doing is living in a time that George Orwell predicted in his book 1984. How many of you guys have actually read that book? Yep. All right. You know, he says in times of universal deceit, the act of telling the truth is seen as a revolutionary act. And I'm afraid that we're living in those times now. But I want to encourage each and every one of you, the truth does prevail. Make sure people understand what that Second Amendment is for. Make sure people understand the First Amendment, Second Amendment, First Amendment, and all of our amendments. Make sure that they understand what our rights are, who they come from, and testify to that truth to not just today's generation, but future generations. And as your next governor, with your support, with your blessing, I'm going to make sure that we have somebody up there in that building across the street that's actually going to defend your rights. So thank you guys for coming out today. Thank God for giving us a spell at the rain, and God bless America, you guys. Thank you very much. Hey guys. All right.
Thank you, Senator Colbeck. Appreciate that. We've got a couple of more speakers coming up, ladies and gentlemen. One is my good friend Rick Ector. He's a NRA qualified firearms instructor from Detroit. Runs Rick's Firearm Academy and writes the blog Legally Armed in Detroit. And Marcus Allen Weldon. He was arrested a couple of years ago for legally defending himself from a couple of armed thugs. He was eventually exonerated, and he's written a book about his experience called The Santa Shooter, Guilty Until Proven Innocent. For those of you that don't already know, my name is Bob Powell. I publish a conservative Christian news program called The Truth is Viral. And as I said before, we're streaming live on the Guerrilla Media Network, G1NBC, and the Santilli Broadcasting Network, and the millions who watch Liberty One TV. Now, apart from being a father, the three most important and formative roles that I've played in my life have been as a journalist, a United States Marine, and a Christian. Those roles have prepared me for my adult life, teaching me the importance of three things: honor, duty, and truth. Some people have forgotten those concepts. Some people never learned them to begin with. But they're what drive me and influence everything that I do. When I raised my right hand as a new recruit in Parris Island and swore to defend this nation from all enemies, foreign and domestic, I don't recall being issued an expiration date. I will remain a Marine under oath, even in death, standing at attention in a horizontal fashion for eternity in a smart, orderly, and proficient military manner. until Gabriel blows his horn and calls me home to be with our Lord. Can I get a new raw? All right. Now, when I completed my tour of duty, I went to college in Detroit, earned a degree in broadcast journalism, and because I'd always been a news hound, I loved it. I've worked as an editor and journalist in newspapers, radio, and television since 1986, and I have to tell you that journalism today looks nothing like it did 30 years ago. The politically motivated lies that pass for mainstream media today would make Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite puke, spinning in their graves. The mainstream media couldn't tell the truth that their lives depended on it. Notice I didn't say couldn't. They absolutely could, but they just refused to do it because the truth doesn't support their left-wing agenda. President Trump is 100% correct, labeling the press fake news and an enemy of the people, because that's exactly what they are. Network news channels like CNN and MSNBC and legacy newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post aren't even pretending to be honest brokers of the truth anymore. They publish stories that are patently untrue, and any truth that may be revealed is hidden deep within the body of a story and not emphasized at all. Journalists call this burying the lead. Parkland student David Hogg was on Brian Stelter's CNN program recently and was making all kinds of factual errors and false assertions. Stelter knew that Hogg was spewing fake news, but he didn't even attempt to correct him. Stelter let him continue with his comments, saying whatever he wanted, no matter how untrue his statements were. I can't lay all the blame on Hogg and Stelter because there's so much to spread around among the television talking heads and various anti-gun weirdos that they trot out to spew moronic left-wing talking points. When they're not flat out lying about guns, they prove their tragic ignorance every time they open their mouths. About a dozen newly minted high school and anti-gun activists have emerged after the Parkland shooting, and the media is tripping all over themselves to have these kids on their shows. And it's obvious that these kids don't have any idea what they're talking about. I've listened to their interviews, I've read their tweets, and I'm pretty sure that they don't even teach civics or history at Parkland High School, or spelling, for that matter. They'll say and do anything to promote their agenda, blatantly lying to get a cheer from the crowds of the leftists that they address. Several months before Michael Bloomberg and George Soros financed the March for Our Lives that took place in Washington, D.C., David Hogg tweeted that even though he was an atheist, there might be a God because he had no homework over winter break. But when he ended his speech at the D.C. protest, he raised his fist like every communist gun grabber before him and shouted, "God bless you and God bless America." What a hypocrite. I'm surprised his tongue didn't catch fire in his mouth. There's no level to which these people won't stoop in order to get their point across, even if the point is invalid. And the media allows them to get away with it because they make for good television as they work to strip away our rights. Despite their painful ignorance of the Constitution, gun laws, or even the basic functions of a firearm, the media has raised them up to be the new face of the anti-gun agenda, while ignoring other Parkland students like Kyle Kashev and Hunter Pollock, who have actually accomplished something in the form of legislation in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting. When President Trump invited the Parkland students and their parents to come to the White House for a listening session, Hogg proudly hung up on the White House official that made the call. I guess he had boycotts to plan and books to sell. Well, those boycotts didn't work out so well, though, did they? Gun sales are up. The NRA's membership is at an all-time high. Laura Ingram's ratings jumped 20%, and so have sales of MyPillow, whose founder refused to be bullied by these kids. A couple of companies did cave to Hogg's bullying tactics, though, some eagerly, like Dick's Sporting Goods, due to their new and, might I add, unconstitutional policy to stop selling rifles to anybody under 21 and to stop selling the AR platform altogether. Every gun manufacturer in the country has decided to stop doing business with Dick's. I guess the moral to the story is, don't be dicks. Now, if I were fortunate enough to have David Hogg on my show, and I do think I'd be fortunate because it would be awesome, the first question I would ask him would be, can you recite the Second Amendment? And I guarantee you he wouldn't be able to do it. I'm willing to bet that he wouldn't be able to do it, and to go further, I know for a fact that he and his cohorts wouldn't be able to explain the reasoning behind the founders' decision when they decided to write it. 3 months ago, these kids were eating Tide Pods and snorting condoms. But now, God help us, the media holds out these foul-mouthed brats to be constitutional legal scholars and role models for the next generation. And you're not allowed to rebut their garbage arguments either. If anyone tries to counter any of their bull snot with facts, they're banned from social media for bullying and harassment. I know this for a fact because it's happened to me more than once. Immune to criticism, these kids are allowed to bully and harass gun owners and businesses that support the Second Amendment all they want. And they slander the good names of Second Amendment defenders like Dana Lash, using the most despicable language to call us complicit in the murders of children just because we belong to the NRA and support the Second Amendment. A few days ago, Tucker Carlson had New Mexico congressional candidate Pat Davis on his show. Davis, a Democrat, of course, was getting inked because of his F the NRA television advertisement. Tucker asked him, how many mass shootings have been committed by NRA members? Davis refused to answer the question because he knows that the answer is 0. And Tucker tore him up. A second Davis campaign spot claimed that an AR-15 can fire 150 rounds a minute, which is actually about twice the actual rate of fire for a good shooter using a semi-automatic rifle. And I'm not even counting the time that it takes to change out a 30-round mag. Because maybe Davis used one of those full semi-automatic ghost guns to run his test. I don't know. I'd like the one if it can fire 150 rounds a minute. Now, if he gets elected, he'll be fast friends with California Democrat Representative Eric Swalwell, who recently called for a repeal of the Second Amendment. And I have to give him credit, though, because he was honest. Most of these lying gun grabbers will repeat the phrase over and over again, we don't want to take your guns, we don't want to take your guns, we don't want to take your guns, over and over like it's a Tibetan meditation chant. But Swalwell had no problem telling us that confiscating guns is exactly what he wants to do. And he's not alone. Former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens wrote an editorial in the New York Times calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment 2 months ago. Attention horror, Shannon Watts, the dimmest bulb in the universe and head of Michael Bloomberg's funded Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, wants to take your guns too. She recently tweeted out a photo of a scary-looking black rifle to Sportsman's Warehouse demanding that they stop selling it. It wasn't an AR-15. It wasn't even a semi-automatic rifle. The rifle in question was a .22 caliber bolt-action Ruger. I want so badly to respond to her stupidity on Twitter with 280 characters of brutal truth, but I don't dare because whenever she's confronted with a fact, she blocks the person who presented it, and I need to be able to keep my eye on her so I can keep up with her lies. These people regularly inflate the numbers of school shootings in the U.S. while taking great pains to ignore the carnage on the streets of Chicago, where failed liberal governance, political correctness that fails to recognize the problem, and gang wars have resulted in more casualties since 2003 than soldiers who have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. I guess those black lives don't matter to gun control activists. If Chicago does happen to be mentioned, they say, well, the guns came from states with lax gun laws like Indiana. But that logic is fatally flawed. It's called liberal logic, because more guns equals more violence, they say. But if that were the case, Indianapolis would be the war zone, and not Chicago, where guns are all but banned. According to facts, the vast majority of gun homicides in Chicago are committed by drug gangs, and nearly all of the victims are black, which is a politically inconvenient truth for the press. But Chicago only ranks 25th on the list of America's most violent cities. If one were to discount similar murders in the top 4 Democratic-run hellholes of St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Detroit, the United States would be the 4th safest country on the planet. Instead of offering common sense gun solutions, like posting armed guards in schools, which, assuming 1 guard per school, would create 8,000 jobs in Texas alone, what do Democrats suggest that we do to protect ourselves from a bad guy with a deadly weapon? Well, in one school district in Pennsylvania, they've started outfitting each room in their schools with a bucket of rocks that students can throw at an active shooter. The University of Colorado suggests that female students being attacked by a rapist piss their pants to spoil his libido.
Oh my.
Have you ever heard anything so stupid and idiotic in your life? I think my method's better. I trained my daughters to draw down on anyone who would assault them and make him piss his pants instead.
Yeah.
After the shooting in Santa Fe, liberals all over the country once again raised the battle cry. Republicans and the NRA have blood on their hands before the bodies of those 10 precious children were even cold. Would you like me to tell you who and what is responsible for the violence that we're seeing today? The blood is on the hands of Democrats who turned our cities into ghettos, destroying black families so they can keep voters who are dependent on the government to survive. In his new song, Ye versus the People, rap artist Kanye West observes, "That's the problem with this damn nation. All blacks gotta be Democrats. Man, we ain't made it off the plantation." The blood is on the hands of radical leftist teachers who have been teaching their students to think of all conservatives as Nazis that must be killed. The blood is on the hands of video game manufacturers who create games like Grand Theft Auto, where the object of the game is to assault, shoot, and run over as many innocent people as possible, while raping hookers, robbing liquor stores, and slaughtering police officers just because they wear a uniform. Our children are being desensitized by these video games. Their innate morality and empathy for others is being destroyed. And when they go out into the real world to carry out one of these horrific attacks, they act like they are still playing that game. The blood is on the hands of know-nothing, hypocritical actors and actresses in liberal Hollywood. They use their popularity to demand stricter gun control while they themselves are protected by armed security, and then go on to make movies which glorify gun violence. The blood is on the hands of anarcho-communist terrorist groups like Antifa and By Any Means Necessary, who take kids out into the streets to cause mayhem and punch Nazis because that's the cool thing to do. I have zero love for real Nazis, but if you have conservative values, respect our flag, and love our Constitution, then you are automatically a Nazi in the eyes of the left. The blood is on the hands of high school students who bully, marginalize, or ostracize kids that look different, act different, or lack age-appropriate social skills. Parkland student Emma Gonzalez admitted such behavior in her first televised speech, and I quote, "Since he was in middle school, it was no surprise to anyone who knew him to hear that Nicholas Cruz was the shooter. Those talking about how we should not have ostracized him didn't know this kid, okay? We did." Maybe if Nicholas Cruz hadn't been ostracized, maybe if his peers had lived up to all their kumbaya virtue signaling and acted like they gave a damn about him, he would not have decided to take revenge for years of abuse, and 14 children and 3 teachers would still be alive. The blood is on the hands of Big Pharma, which encourages doctors to prescribe potent psychotropic drugs to kids that don't need them, labeling them with made-up diagnoses like ADHD. You know, the treatment for ADHD is Ritalin or Adderall. It's basically methamphetamines. That's what real Nazis gave their troops to allow them to commit atrocities and not be racked by guilt. Every mass shooter in modern times, every single one has had one thing in common. They were all on antidepressant medication, usually an SSRI. And the blood is on the hands of those who have refused to accept these simple truths. Almost all school shootings and or school-related acts of violence have been committed by those taking or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs. Between 2004 and 2012, there were nearly 15,000 reports to the FDA's MedWatch system on psychiatric drugs that cause violent side effects. I remember when I was a kid, the hardware store sold dynamite over the counter to farmers who needed to remove tree stumps or big rocks. Teenagers at my high school used to come to school with their hunting rifles on a rack on their trucks. There wasn't a rash of bombings or school shootings back then, but that was 50 years ago. So what's changed? Our society has changed to become more self-centered, greedy, and violent. The problem is a sickness in the hearts of Americans, a sickness that has been fed by the media and fake news outlets like CNN and MSNBC, a sickness that's been growing like a cancer since the 60s when God was taken out of our schools. Secular humanism is the new religion, and morality and empathy plays no role in it. This is truly the me generation. This sad state of affairs was prophesied by the Apostle Paul in the book of 2 Timothy. He wrote, "In the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends. They will be reckless and puffed up with pride and love pleasure rather than God." Does that sound familiar, patriots? Hasn't the world become exactly the way Paul said it would be? The violence that we're seeing in our society today is one thing that the left cannot blame on guns or Christian conservative white men. We fought against the neo-communist agenda that's infected our schools and our culture, and we lost because we didn't fight hard enough. We were too afraid to offend anybody, and the violence that we're witnessing now is the result of a generation of progressive liberals who got their way like spoiled kids. Even though communism has failed every time that it's been tried and left a trail of 100 million dead bodies in its wake, those on the far left will cheat, lie, and steal to make their dream of a communist utopia come to pass. They will do and say anything to undermine us and our president and our culture. They failed to take down President Trump with their totally fabricated Russian collusion delusion, and now they've hung all of their hopes and dreams on the lies of a washed-up whore and her sleazy lawyer. They will fail again. I promise you this. And many of the filthy traitors behind this attempted soft coup are going to end up in prison for their efforts, including some of the highest-ranking employees of the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the State Department. If there's any justice left in the world, Hillary Clinton will be one of them. You'd like to see President Trump keep his campaign promise to lock her up, wouldn't you?
Yes.
All right, well, let's hear him from all the way from Lansing, Michigan. Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up! It's probably too much to hope that Barry Obama will join her in the Gray Bar Hotel, but hope springs eternal, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. People say that tyranny can't possibly come to America. Those people are wrong, and the founders knew it 200 years before they were born. The fact that more than a dozen top-ranking government officials conspired to conceal the crimes of Hillary Clinton and make up crimes with which to bring down the duly elected president of these United States It is absolute proof that there is a seditious deep state that will do anything to maintain power, even commit treason. This is why the founders wrote the Second Amendment, so that we can protect our natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness against tyrants in our own government, if necessary. Lost in the conversation about guns is the fact that the Second Amendment is not about personal protection. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. The founders were not fearful of a deer uprising. The Second Amendment was written to give we the people the ability to shoot back at a government turned over to tyrants so that we could maintain the freedom that they fought, bled, and died for their children to enjoy. Even if those who would see us disarmed were able to ban semi-automatic rifles, and I'm not going to call them assault rifles because there's no such thing, it would make precious little difference to those determined to take the lives of innocents. Bill Clinton's ban on AR-15 in the 90s proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. The ban did not affect the numbers of shootings at all, but it did screw the Democrats out of a midterm victory. And Republican lawmakers need to remember that lesson. Guns are not the enemy. They're simply tools. The enemy is the so-called resistance, progressive values, violent video games and music, and psychotropic drugs that are turning our children into killers. If someone determined to kill can't use a gun, they will use any other method at their disposal. Sayfullah Saipov swore allegiance to ISIS and used a rental truck to kill 8 and injure 7 more on a bike path in New York City last year. And the ISIS magazine Inspire is telling wannabe jihadists how to commit terrorist attacks without conventional weapons. Also in New York, a man by the name of Julio Gonzalez killed 87 people when he used a few gallons of gasoline and a book of matches to torch the Happy Land Social Club in the Bronx. The ISIS-inspired Sarnea brothers used pressure cookers filled with crushed up 4th of July sparklers to kill 3 and injure hundreds more at the Boston Marathon. Timothy McVeigh snuffed out the lives of 168 innocent people and maimed another 680 when he blew up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City with a rental truck filled with fertilizer and racing fuel. In the worst terrorist attack the U.S. has ever experienced, Muslim terrorists killed more than 3,000 people using nothing more than box cutters and pepper spray. America does not have a gun problem, patriots. We have a problem of the heart. And until somebody can come up with a test that can determine the contents of a person's soul, there will always be evil people who will use any method at their disposal to kill innocents at school, at work, or at play. Further restricting guns is not the answer, especially not now that we are at war with radical Islam and the far left, whose inexplicable hatred for Donald Trump and those who voted him into office is driving them to betray our country and commit horrible crimes against innocent Americans. When any trip to our children's schools, a mall, a sporting event, or a movie theater can turn into a life or death situation, we the people must be armed and ready to meet that threat and neutralize it. Every single one of you is a member of the militia mentioned in the Second Amendment, and you must be prepared to defend yourselves, your families, and your communities from crazies, religious fanatics, and tyrants. We've grown soft, spoiled by microwave dinners, cable television, and the wonders of the internet. We suffer from what's called normalcy bias, which causes us to discount and deny that there are any real threats to our freedom out there. We must get serious about the security of our country, ourselves, and our children. We can never let our guard down, because that's how you get killed. Our forefathers fought a war in the name of liberty and carved out a new nation rooted in truth and the natural rights of men, establishing a government based on the Constitution that John Adams stated was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. If we wish to remain free men and women, we must remember that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So when this rally is over, I want you to go forth from this place, patriots. Remain vigilant and pray that our martial skills will never be called upon to defend our lives or the Republic. God bless each one of you. Semper Fi and hoorah. Thank you very much. Right now I'd like to bring up my good friend Rick Ector. He runs Rick's Firearm Academy in Detroit. He's an NRA certified weapons instructor, and he writes the blog Legally Armed in Detroit. Mr. Ector, would you grace us, sir?
Yeah.
Oh man, was that fiery or what? I mean, I'm back here on stage and I'm getting chills, man. Truly getting chills. But first and foremost, let me say to you all that I am truly glad to be here. All anyone has to do to get me to show up and to appear and tell me that there are going to be my fellow American citizens who have a right to bear arms, people who are willing to come out and speak in favor of that right and to gather and support one another. So I definitely, at this very moment, there's no place I'd rather be than to be here with you all today. To that end, man, Bobby really gave us a history lesson and took us all down through there, and I truly appreciate that. The one thing that I really felt on my heart to really talk about today is the Second Amendment and how from a practical day-to-day standpoint we can apply it and use it to address some issues that are confronting our communities. The biggest atrocity that is happening in our major urban areas and in communities all over the country is affecting the fairer sex. It's affecting women. In the city of Detroit alone, every year, it's never talked about. Even when you look at our criminal statistics, the crime of rape is a huge problem. You look at the statistics in the city of Detroit going back year after year after year. These criminal sexual assaults are happening on the range of at least 500 every year. It is the greatest crime against women that's not being talked about, it's not being addressed. Even when our local leaders tell us, hey, we think we got a handle on crime. We believe that homicides are down. We believe that armed robberies are down. You know, there are some people in the media who even question as to whether those statistics are real, and they point to the fact that the state of Michigan, who tabulates those crime statistics, they no longer accepted them from the Detroit Police Department. The point being is that it's rough out there, and it's especially hard on women, and women need to take on a more active role in their personal protection. Approximately 7 years ago, I saw a news story that truly affected me. It was a story in the city of Detroit where a woman's body had been beaten, raped, and discarded in the street as if it was just trash. And I was thinking to myself, wow, that's heavy, that's deep. Someone should do something about that. And ironically, just a couple of days ago before this rally, a very similar crime occurred in Detroit. A woman was found naked in the city of Detroit, had obviously been violently attacked, and her body was found, and they brought her to the local hospital and they treated her, but she eventually succumbed to her injuries. And it just takes me back to that first story that really affected me and bothered me 7 years ago, man. Someone needs to do something. This is like a huge problem and no one's addressing it. So it came to me in an epiphany, you know, it was like a sudden stroke of genius, I'd say. You know, someone should just grab as many women as they can and ask them if they want to learn how to shoot a gun. You know, this is towards the period of time when I was making my migration from MySpace. You all remember MySpace, right? I made it from MySpace over to Facebook, where everyone seems to be hanging out right now. And I put out a post, and that post was, hey, this is directed to all women. Whoever you are, if you have a desire to take on a more active role in your personal protection, you know, just come to this place, come to this gun range and meet me and 4 other firearms instructors, and we will teach you how to shoot. We will remove all typical barriers that someone might face. Fear, uncertainty, a willing tutor, access to a firearm, ammunition, and the fees that you pay the proprietors of these gun ranges to allow you to shoot and practice on their facility. So we did 50, and I felt pretty good about that, but there was something inside that said, you know what, you can do more. You can do better. The demand is out there. This is the first time that you're doing something. The first time that you're doing something is also the hardest time that you're doing something. Good friend of mine, Ken Blanchard, he runs the website Black Man with a Gun, and I was speaking with him in Detroit. He was a keynote speaker at a dinner that I had in Detroit years ago, and he said, man, look, you're on to something. You know, stay the course and continue to drive this. And I took his words to heart. And every year I tried to do this thing bigger and better every year. That following year we did 100 from our initial 50. And then we doubled it to 200. And then we added another 50% to 300, and then 400. And then last year, man, we had 600. And I'm here to tell you that tomorrow morning, I will be at a gun range in Metro Detroit in Taylor, and we expect to have 800 women who are having interest in taking on an active role in their personal protection. Now, it takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of resources, it takes talking and getting people to do things. I had an ammunition company, Aguilar Ammunition. They came through with 16,000 rounds of ammunition. And 49 fellow firearms trainers agreed to donate their whole day to train these people and to keep them safe. I mean, it's just been a great activity, and I look forward to letting everyone know that the event was successful. The thing that also, in my mind, that is a factor is that gun ownership, despite being under constant attack, the fastest growing segment of our population that is adopting guns and gun ownership is women. And we need to embrace that. And we need to help them protect themselves and their families, because obviously, just looking at the stats for the city of Detroit, we're 500 rapes year after year after year, and nothing's being done. Sometimes you have to accept the fact that you are your protector. You are your family's protector. It depends on you to make sure that you are safe. Yes, it's great to have the government, the local government, whether it's our police departments or it's our county sheriff's offices or the state police or the federal government. Yeah, it's nice to have those resources, but you need to be your first responder. Whether you are female or you are male, you need to be able to keep yourself safe. And that's the message that I have here today. I want to thank you all for coming out, and thank you for allowing me to speak and address to you all. And I want you all to have a great day. Thank you.
That was sweet. And ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Marcus Allen Weldon. 2 years ago, he defended himself with a weapon that he had a license to carry legally. And he was arrested and charged with 2 attempted murder charges along with a few other felonies. He was eventually exonerated In my opinion, he never should have been arrested in the first place. Should have given him a parade down Main Street. He was coming home from a Christmas celebration, still in his Santa Claus outfit. So the media named him the Santa Claus Shooter, and that's the name of his book that he's put out. It's called The Santa Shooter, Guilty Until Proven Innocent. Marcus Allen Weldon, ladies and gentlemen.
What's going on? You know, Mother Nature is actually not too bad because when I first pulled up, I said, oh man, we're not gonna be able to have this rally if this rain continues, but to my surprise, Mother Nature let up. So I'm happy to be here. I drove from Detroit, so you know, that's about a good hour-and-a-half drive. Car trouble, but still made it out. Almost had to jump in the back with Rick Ector. I told him, I said, hey man, if this car keeps giving me trouble, you got me? He said, you know I got you. So, but I made it out here, so God bless. And like I said, I'm happy to be here. So, you know, I know a lot of you are thinking, oh, the Santa Claus shooter, how did you shoot Santa? I mean, what's this name? How in the world did the New York Times dub you the Santa Shooter? So I'm gonna give you a little background on the story, because I didn't shoot Santa, I actually was Santa. And unfortunately, I was leaving an event dressed as Santa because of it was the uniform for my event, working with the promotional company I was working with. And I got into an altercation while I was helping a friend, a young lady. She had a flat tire in Detroit. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning. Two guys, as I was assisting her with her tire, two guys assaulted her, and it became a situation where I had to use my firearm to defend myself and her. Now, unfortunately, when it comes down to self-defense shooting, and kind of my topic of discussion here is, what is the aftermath of a self-defense shooting? A lot of people, you know, you get your license, you have your firearm, and you kind of never really think about the aftermath of what you will face after you use your firearm, after you just decide to pull that trigger in self-defense. You may think, hey, I'm gonna have a parade downtown, you know, I'm a good guy. I just saved myself and someone else, I defended my family. Not necessarily true. My life as an activist, activism is something that I didn't choose, it chose me. After I was charged with 7 felonies and realized that, you know, it's not gonna be the story that I thought it was gonna be. I'm actually considered not the victim, but I'm considered the aggressor in the situation. Downtown Detroit, fired, I can't even tell you how many rounds I fired from my XDM 40 caliber, but there was this anxiety, this rush of adrenaline, and quickly I realized that my life is turned upside down as I laid in the street handcuffed and was surrounded by 4 to 5 officers pointing their firearm at me, telling me to get on the ground. So, what should you expect? Well, first of all, we're going to talk about the media. I'm going to raise this mic up just a tad bit. I'm a little bit taller than Mr. Ector. Straighten my back out a little bit. So, of course, once you hear a story in the news about using your firearm, the first thing is you're demonized. You know, the media is going to paint this picture of you being this gun-toting thug that decided to be trigger happy, and especially if you're wearing a Santa Claus suit. That just doesn't look right at all, right? It's a good title for a story. Sells plenty of newspapers. They're going to destroy your character. My character was ran under the rug. I mean, I was, like I said, the Santa Claus shooter. I was the guy who decided to be, was it John Wayne or, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger? I don't know, one of these characters of Grand Theft Auto. You know, they try to paint as many images as possible. Actually, the mugshot on the news that they used is actually a picture of me when I was about 17 years old. I don't know how they found, but the picture was just looking so dark, and I said, man, you know, I got a couple of good shots on Facebook you could have used, but I mean, if you want to use that one, I guess it paints the image perfect. And unfortunately, because of the media priming the minds of the public, I didn't have much success having people come to my aid in the beginning. I had to go and reverse this whole media manipulation by having my pastor, guys like Rick Ector, who came to my defense and get on. I don't know if you guys heard of the Let It Rip There's a Channel 2, they have this debate format where you get guys on the couch and they get a chance to talk about hot topics. And I had to pretty much, through my pastor and my family, show that, hey, I'm not the guy the media is trying to make me out to be. The second part of it that really, 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 really destroys you in the aftermath of a self-defense shooting after you're just being labeled a criminal is you got to come out tons and tons of money. You're talking about a 401k that's going to now be used on legal fees. You're talking about a savings account that's going to be emptied out. I spent at least 50 grand in legal fees. Now, how many of you have 50 grand kind of laying in your bank account strictly for legal fees and strictly just in case, hey, if I have to use my firearm? How many of you? No one. Now, of course, there are programs out here that you can be involved in. You know, you got the USCCA, you got NRA Carry Guard. There's so many firearms, legal protection. But at the time, I did not know about these programs. And because of that, I had to come out of my own pocket, and I had to use my own money, and my family had to come up with money, my church had to come up with money, and I had to foot this bill that ended up becoming around, like I said, close to 50 grand. We're talking about bond, we're talking about I was put on tether, so that's $100 a week, house arrest. We're talking about forensic experts, attorney fees, we're talking about video experts, and I don't know if you know this stat, but 94% of cases end in plea deals because of the fact that people don't have the money to fight a case and take it to a jury or take it and sit in front of a judge and prove their innocence. So a lot of times people take this deal and say, hey, I'd rather go ahead and just get the first, couple years. And I was facing 7 felonies, so you figure, hey, 7 felonies is about 30 years in prison. Hey, let me take the 2 years or a year and get out on good behavior, and I'll be good to go. But of course, if you do that, you're going to be stamped with what? A felon. You're going to be labeled a felon, and you're no longer going to be able to seek an employment, right? So I had to, between the year of 2014 up to the year of 2016, stick to my guns, literally. And through all of the money and all of the headache, I had to fight it, waking up every morning, looking at the news, seeing my picture constantly on rotation, being labeled the Santa Claus Shooter. I had to really, really find a way to not lose my mind. And one of the ways I did this was, of course, being around family and friends. I ended up writing a book about my experience. I figured, hey, if I do get arrested, I'm not arrested, I've already been arrested. If I do get found guilty, or if I break down and take this plea deal, at least my daughter will know the full story. So, why do I carry? I had a friend of mine back in 2012 in Detroit. It gives me chills every time I talk about it, but he was murdered at a Coney Island, and he was carjacked. And because of the fact that we went to so many different gun-free zones, and a lot of times you go to the casinos and hanging out, a lot of times he would leave his firearm at home. He wouldn't even bring it because it was like, well, what's the point? I can't carry it anywhere. Everywhere I go, they're telling me leave it in the car, and I don't want no one to break into my vehicle, take my firearm. So he left his firearm. Unfortunately, that was his last day. He was murdered and killed and carjacked. At that point, I decided it is I have to embrace this right and start to carry a firearm to protect my own life so I won't become another victim. And it was then after that situation, and of course my case followed up a couple years later, I started to research and understand what the Second Amendment was all about. I started to study the Constitution. I started to study the Bill of Rights. And I realized very quickly, as you all know, it's not just about hunting, it's about self-defense and defending yourself against tyranny. What is tyranny? I mean, people think that that's just kind of an archaic term, but I disagree. Tyranny could be rogue law enforcement, it could be prosecutor misconduct, it could be Congress putting down laws that can enslave you with a pen. I mean, it can be all kind of ways you can look at tyranny, and unfortunately, we do not understand, well, I realize that especially in the urban area, we do not understand the Second Amendment and what it really stood for. So as I began my journey, I was fully exonerated in 2016 in July 21st, I'm sorry, June 21st, 2016. And I just was like, I gotta do something, you know, this information is so vital, I gotta get it out here. How do I do it? So, you know, who else can I talk to kind of help me brainstorm? Mr. Ector. Followed up with Rick, you know, he got me involved, he showed me the ropes, he said, hey, listen, man, he was a mentor, a friend, and I began to really just reach out and try to just inspire and get people to really look deep into this thing. And my story became kind of that gave me that voice. And I really, you know, as a father, I really realized that it's up to me to really just educate our youth, man. You know, I went to Detroit public schools. I had situations where guys carried firearms all through high school. You know, it was just normal, illegally. And violence was just normalized. I mean, it was something that you see every day. People get robbed for gym shoes. People get carjacked. Of course, like I said, my friend got carjacked. So it was like, okay, a lot of people in Detroit don't even know you can legally carry a firearm at the age of 21. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't even know that, like I said, there's programs out here that you can be involved in that if you do get into self-defense shooting, they will put up your legal fees. So you won't have to worry about coming out your 401k, or you won't have to worry about emptying out your savings account. And this information for everyone here, it may seem like, you know, second nature. I mean, yeah, how do you not know that? But it's kept away intentionally, in my opinion, in the urban areas. It's something that we don't talk about. The gun is bad. It's you know, you don't need to carry a gun. Why do you need to carry a gun? Call 911 if you have a situation. Well, how long would it take 911, or how long would it take the law enforcement to show up? How quickly does it happen when someone pulls a gun out and says, give me your car, and pulls that trigger? You think law enforcement can be there within that matter of seconds? That's crazy. And of course, in Detroit, when you have a high crime area and you have drug gangs, I mean, you know, you name it, it's something to me is a no-brainer. And I just came up with this epiphany. I said, man, reading this Constitution, reading these Bill of Rights, and understanding what I'm involved in right now, if you give up your right to bear arms, you're a slave. And it's pretty much self-explanatory, because if you look in the history, even in not just Black America, but America in general, slaves or people who were in poverty were not allowed to own firearms. And then when slavery was abolished, it was a situation where if you owned the firearm, you were in trouble. That was the way they kept blacks enslaved. And that was one of the things that I learned, and I said, hey, you know, it's kind of being done the same way now, but just kind of, you know, in a clandestine way, because they're not giving you the information. So now you're not carrying. You don't believe that that's your right, but it is your right. It's your right. And like I said, for everyone here, it seems like, okay, that's second nature, but there's a lot of people who do not understand that. And when they see me, or see Mr. Ector, or see someone in Detroit who's a black man carrying a gun, it's automatically that stereotype of, oh, this guy must be a criminal. Well, no, I just know my right. And, you know, it just baffles me that there's a lot of this stuff going on, and when you look at different news stations, the agenda is being pushed that we're supposed to be victims. Unbelievable. So, in my story, seeing how I can make a difference with the platform that I was able to get on these different news outlets and really get out here and be this big advocate. There was so many people reaching out to me and saying, hey, my son is going through the same situation, or my brother's going through the same situation. He defended himself, and most activists, most of these activists didn't want to touch his case because it dealt with a firearm. And they automatically looked at him or looked at the individual as, well, if you used a firearm, then you must have been wrong. You must have something must have went left because, I mean, why do you have a gun? That's how they look at it. So it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle. You know, most people feel that, like I said, if you carry a gun, you're the bad guy. And through my book, I really give a detailed description of the aftermath that you're going to have to go through, breaking down the rights. It's kind of I call it the urban guide for gun owners. And it's not just for the urban area, but it's for everyone, because you all could be in a situation where you have to use your firearm. And then what? Are you ready? Are you proactive? Do you have these insurance policies in place? Do you have firearms legal protection? Do you have attorneys on speed dial? Do you have the information? Are you able to, you know, in a calm state, after you're going through this adrenaline rush, think and say, okay, after the fight is over, you know, the gun battle's over, there's things that's gonna happen, you're gonna get handcuffed, you know, there may be a situation where the officers are coming in and they don't know who's who, so you need to make sure that you're not looking like the bad guy with a gun in your hand. So you wanna make sure that in your mind, you kind of play this over and over, this scenario over and over, so that you are constantly, you know, you're aware of what's going to happen, and then it's second nature when it does happen. And I'm not going to say it is going to happen, but there's a possibility it is going to happen. So, you know, if you want to reach out to me, my website is marcusweldon.com. I speak all over events like this. This is actually my third time, I believe, coming to the state capitol speaking at a gun rights rally. And every time I come, someone hasn't heard my story. And they can't believe that someone will be prosecuted for a justifiable self-defense. And let me tell you, I had video footage. So the video footage was held until after I decided to go to trial, because they wanted the preliminary exam to be pretty much rushed through so we can hurry up and get this guy, process him, and hopefully he will take a plea deal before the information comes out that he's innocent. These are some of the tactics that they use. Prosecuting misconduct is hard to prove, but if you do it in a clandestine way where you're able to say, okay, well, we're gonna hold back information, hold back evidence, and hopefully by the time he runs out of money, he'll take the plea deal, then okay, then we'll release the evidence, and then you may have to go for an appeal, but guess what? You sign a plea deal, so that appeal is that much harder to do. So all of these things I map out in my book, all these things I talk about constantly, because it's going to be a long, arduous process. Like I said, 1 year and 3 months for me. And I had a friend of mine who, well, actually, his mother had reached out to me when he was in prison. When he was in Wayne County Jail, and he did about 8 months, and I was going to court with his mom, and I was watching him as he was coming from the back in his orange jumpsuit. He had his hands behind his back, handcuffed, and they were trying to get him to take a plea deal for 13 years. And I'm not gonna say the only reasons, but one of the reasons why he didn't take the plea deal was because the discussion I had with his mother. And she looked at my story and she said, my son is innocent. I watched your case very closely, and I'm gonna make sure that my son gets the same result. And I'm not gonna let him fold and take that plea deal. That is one of the biggest weapons they use against gun owners, is that plea deal, when they know they don't have a case. So, thank you for having me out. I'll be here to talk afterwards and shake hands and take some pictures with you all, because I'm one of them guys that love to put pictures on my Facebook, so get ready. Show your good side, all right?
Well, you know, Marcus is right about tyranny coming in many forms. Got the tyranny of the individual. I don't know, probably some of you have watched my show before, and my coverage of the Bundy Ranch in 2014, and the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge up in good old Oregon. I barely escaped a federal prison term myself. I was an unindicted co-conspirator. And all I did was rebroadcast the streams of my good friend Peter T. Santilli, who is at this moment rebroadcasting this stream to up to 20 million people. Pete did stay in prison for 2 years without a trial, without the opportunity to post bail. They charged him for impeding government officials in the performance of their duty, which of course was a total load of crap. They dropped the charges against him in Oregon the day before the trial started. Then they sent him down to Nevada, where he languished in a federal prison for 680 some days. Never did a thing wrong. Wasn't carrying a gun, didn't threaten anybody. All he did was show the truth on a live stream, and it embarrassed government officials like Dirty Harry Reid, and they made sure that Pete paid for it. Because they're trying to intimidate people like me and Pete, people that go out there and tell the truth, people that don't share in the mainstream media lies. Well, they can't. They can do whatever they want to with our bodies. Well, these are just temporary households for us. We're destined for greater things. But let me tell you, we do get some justice here on earth. Stephen Myrie, the prosecutor in Nevada, was fired from his position after it came out that he had withheld 3,000 pages of exculpatory evidence that proved that the Bundys had done absolutely nothing wrong. The judge admonished him for flagrantly violating their constitutional rights and showing a complete disregard for the Constitution. And she dismissed the charges against the Bundys with prejudice. They will never be charged for those crimes again.
Yeah.
But they paid for their patriotism. 2 years in a federal prison. Like I said, with no bail, no opportunity to do anything except wait for the hammer to drop. You people are the 3%. You braved the weather to come out here and support this rally, and God love you and God bless every single one of you. Before we call into it, I want to introduce you to somebody very special, Denise Poplowski, the woman who coordinated this event. And I don't imagine that this will be the last one either. I hope that maybe sometime later in the summer we'll be able to do it again. You know, there's the Second Amendment March that's annually held here at the Michigan State Capitol is next month. I want you to come out to that. I'll be here, and we're going to have a great time. And don't forget, when you get home, find The Truth is Viral on Facebook. That's facebook.com/thetruthисviral. Very simple. Go find Rick Ector and subscribe to his page, Legally Armed in Detroit, Rick's Firearm Academy. Go find Marcus Weldon. And I want you to support the candidacy of Patrick Colbeck for the next governorship of the great state of Michigan. So thank you everybody for coming out. My name is Bobby Powell, and until next time, as always, God bless, Semper Fi, and hoorah!
Thank you for watching The Truth is Viral with your host, Bobby Powell. Make sure to follow The Apocalypse on Twitter @TheTruthIsViral. Like The Truth is Viral on Facebook, and if you can, please remember to donate to the cause via PayPal at www.bobpowell.blogspot.com.